Hello and welcome to the Nexus. Today's show, Iron Man. Not the comic book hero, but the real-life billionaire inventor, Elon Musk. The man who wants to take us to Mars has come crashing down to Earth, forced out as chairman of his own company, Tesla. It was a bitter tweet moment that cost him the top job, but was his little message really that bad? And putting all that aside, we'll be asking why Musk always has that sweet smell of success about him. We'll hear from a psychologist who says the key is in his childhood. All that and more here on The Nexus. Hello, I'm Matthew Moore, and today in The Nexus we're looking at a man who arguably has no equal in the business world, the highly creative, inventive and extremely rich Elon Musk. He was bullied as a kid, became a super nerd and is now super rich. But he recently lost his job as chairman of his own company, Tesla, the penalty for a reckless claim he made on Twitter. Lots for us to explore, so let's get started. And it's time to lift the mask on the real life Iron Man, Elon Musk.
Minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6,
5, 4, 3, 2.
Musk is a visionary, pushing the boundaries of science and travel.
The determined engineer's big dreams transformed 3 industries.
Elon Musk, the man who brought us Tesla, SpaceX, PayPal.
Billionaire, an inventor, a scientist, a designer, and one of the world's most innovative minds.
But in true Musk style, he also sent his personal cherry red Tesla into space.
I can't even begin to describe the excitement around me.
SpaceX has announced it's sending a Japanese billionaire up around the moon.
The first paying customer.
I choose to go to the moon. Yeah. Thank you, Elon.
Elon's absolutely fixated on going to Mars.
You sincerely think that we should go to Mars?
Yeah. To create a self-sustaining civilization there.
I'm now convinced that he's an alien.
Well, right now, investors, when it comes to mobility, certainly consider Elon Musk the leader to watch.
Tesla is now more valuable than the Ford Motor Company.
People have called you the real Tony Stark.
Mr. Musk, how are you?
Congratulations on the promotion.
Thank you very much.
Elon.
Thank you.
Those Merlin engines are fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Does anybody tell you no? Does anybody go, Elon, selling a flamethrower?
Yeah, it's a terrible idea. Terrible. I said don't buy this flamethrower.
How many did you make?
20,000.
You're a super villain. That's what a super villain does.
Yeah. Elon Musk accused an organizer of the Thai cave rescue of being a pedophile.
And when it was criticized, he actually doubled down. He wrote another tweet saying, "I'll bet you a signed dollar it's true."
I think people realize what sort of guy he is.
Billionaire Tesla head Elon Musk.
What is he up to?
He appeared to smoke marijuana during a podcast interview.
Tesla's stock plunged before closing at its lowest price since March 2017.
More turmoil for Tesla. This is big. The Securities and Exchange Commission is suing Elon Musk for fraud.
He was accused of duping investors when he tweeted that he had reached a deal to take the company private. Musk is relinquishing his role as company chairman for 3 years.
Well, that kind of blew up a bit like his tweet, actually. Let's go to Alex Webb, a Bloomberg columnist and an all-round business nerd of his own. Let me ask you about Elon Musk's tweet. What was so wrong with it?
Frankly, it was the price that was the main issue. Like, he tweeted that he's thinking of taking Tesla private at $420, funding secured. Now, there had been conversations with the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund, and those conversations, it seemed to have been relatively preliminary, but there had been appetite to extend their investment in Tesla. They already have, I think, about 5% of the stock. Now, this 420 idea was really the bone of contention for the SEC. They said that essentially that price had never been discussed with the Saudis, and Elon went so far as to admit that he had calculated as a 20% premium to the share price, brought it to $419. Then he added $1 to bring it to $420, which was a sort of inside joke for marijuana users.
Let's have a look at the tweet very quickly, Alex. So he says, "I'm considering taking Tesla private at $420, funding secured." Are people not allowed to even say, "I'm considering it" now?
The considering issue isn't the problem. It's saying that he's got the funding secured, because he didn't. He absolutely did not. If you read the SEC filing where they essentially were suing him, they detail all of the meetings that he had, all of the communications that he had, both internally and with potential investors, and there was very little or no evidence that they could find that he had that money in place, and certainly at that price.
Understood. Let's bring in our second guest now, Stephanie Denning. She's in New York. She's also a business journalist who keeps a close eye on Elon Musk. So he's no longer chairman of Tesla, but remains as CEO. Is that the important thing, Stephanie?
I think it's really important. One of the key things that you'll see, I think, with Tesla is that it's called what's a story stock. So that's a little bit like the Amazons of the world. And I think what's key to a story stock is you really need to keep the CEO in position. And in the Tesla case, that would be Elon Musk. I think he's critical to the stock price. But what I would say is I think you need to bring in a strong management team to help him really manage all of these issues.
So you're saying no Elon Musk, no Tesla, really?
That's correct.
Oh,
as
Alex?
it stands right now. As it stands right now.
Alex?
I mean, look, I often think it's instructive to draw a comparison with the management structures at Apple, where, you know, Steve Jobs was very much visionary and created the whole product lineup, but actually the success of Apple as an investment stems very much from Tim Cook. He's the person who's built the process. Now, I think actually that Elon as CEO isn't necessary. Perhaps having a role at the company in some capacity is crucial for that sort of belief and ability to push it forward when it comes to innovation. But when it comes to execution, he has not been good.
Stephanie, a fine of $20 million for someone like Elon Musk is kind of like the average person having to pay a parking fine of $100. So basically, it's not really much of a disincentive for him to toe the line.
No, I think it's fine. And he's also offered to actually pay the fine that Tesla is going to have to pay, the $20 million, because it's actually split between Musk and Tesla. So he's
going
offered
to pay the whole
do
thing.
That. So he says. If that goes through, I don't know yet, but that's what he's offered to do.
Alex, back to you quickly. The fine, $40 million, where does that money go to?
I mean, ultimately, the intention is it goes back to some of the investors who perhaps may have lost out. Some of it will be in the form, I think, of purchasing some of the stock so that he's not selling stock to fund it, I think. But yeah, that is generally how the SEC tends to structure these things.
Well, I mean, he may be a maverick, but despite all his shenanigans, plenty of investors still love him and his ideas. That's why his company, Tesla, is worth more than $50 billion. And as he owns 22% of Tesla and has accumulated wealth with other projects, he is personally worth around $20 billion. And yet Tesla has hardly ever made a profit. Can you explain that one for me, Alex?
Yes, I mean, it's as Stephanie was talking about just now, they're buying into the vision of Tesla, the idea that it will offer the same sort of growth opportunities that Amazon did. I mean, it's obviously a very different business. The expectation that it reaches the $1 trillion valuation that Amazon has is highly unlikely. But they're not investing in Tesla, the company now. They're investing in the company they want Tesla to be. I would caveat, though, as much as there is a lot of appetite for Tesla from investors, it is a very shorted stock. The sentiment towards Tesla from vast tracts of the investor community is overwhelmingly
What about
negative.
their latest numbers, Alex? They're selling at a record rate.
Well, no, let's clarify. It's not selling. They've already sold these cars, and they've actually got orders in the hundreds of thousands. It's making good on those orders. So they don't have a problem with demand right now. They have a severe problem with supply.
Well, Musk predicts that eventually, that apart from where rockets are needed, every form of transport will be electric. And it certainly appears to be going that way. Just take a look at the evolution of London's famous black cabs. They're a lot greener these days.
The good old cab. It's been carrying people around the city since 1948. There are about 20,000 of them on the road. It's quintessentially British and iconic, but also pretty slow, loud and polluting. Until now. The future is here, and it's green. This is the all-new TX. It's a petrol-electric hybrid, and it marks a new age for transport in London. New rules here mean that new cabs must be capable of producing zero emissions by 2032. That means the capital is set to get greener and quieter. So what's it like driving one of these?
Incredibly easy. Incredibly easy. Stick it into gear, foot down, you're away.
How many miles do you get out of an electric engine?
On a typical sort of day, I'd say you get 65.
So if I jumped in the cab and I said, look, I need to go to the other end of London, should I be worried?
No, not at all. You've got the range extender, it takes 36 litres of fuel, and that will simply do the job for you if the battery runs down.
How much does it cost to run?
It cost me around about £4.50 a day, something like that.
£4.50?
£4.50.
And how much did it used to cost you in diesel?
£23, £24 a day. I'm personally saving at least £100 a week.
You know, for people looking for a new car, would you recommend an electric one?
I certainly would, as long as the charging infrastructure picks up.
Do you miss the sound of the engine?
Not a tiny bit at all.
So there you have it. It's cheaper, greener, and it's the black cab of the future. Now, how do I get back to the studio?
And we haven't seen him since. Anyway, let's go to Alex Webb now. Alex, when Elon Musk says every form of transport will end up being electric, apart from rockets, is that the consensus nowadays?
I'm not sure it's the consensus. There are still, huge cost reasons why it's more efficient, more effective. Well, not more efficient, but certainly more effective to have a gas-driven car. I do think it is particularly interesting, actually, that you just picked on the London Taxi company, which makes London taxis. It's actually a Chinese-owned company. Yeah. It's owned by Geely Automotive, and that, of course, is a huge market for Tesla. Geely, of course, also owns Volvo, which is coming out with its own electric cars, which is going to be a competitor to Tesla.
So let's take a quick look at the other big boys from the car market, the auto market. If you look at the miles or the kilometers, really, that they do, Tesla's still way ahead. But I have to ask you, Alex, these other established car makers, do you think they're going to catch up and perhaps even one day overtake Tesla?
Oh, absolutely. Look, it's the Paris Car Show this week. Every car maker is showing off their electric vehicles. A lot of them are saying they've got better range now than Tesla has. I've spoken to people at companies like Daimler, which owns Mercedes, and they say Tesla's solved a huge problem for them. The big concern for car makers looking at electric cars was range anxiety, the fear that cars would not be able to drive an extended period without running out of battery. And they say that Tesla has resolved those concerns now that the consumer is aware that electric cars are feasible.
Stephanie, doesn't that mean that eventually Tesla will be overtaken and made obsolete?
Well, actually, if you go back to the original mission of Tesla, that was always what Elon Musk had in mind, not necessarily to be taken over, but it was never to be the largest car maker in the world. Essentially, what he was looking to do was to change the perception around electric vehicles. And I think that, he's already done that, basically.
You don't think he minds if he goes out of business? At least he's saved the planet?
Well, out of business is questionable. I think that's a different story. I think that's, as I had mentioned, an auto sector issue.
You're right, because actually, of course, the Tesla cars are only one part of the Tesla business. There's a lot of other solar panels and other power infrastructure that he takes care of, which is a big deal as well.
Well, I think if he's looking to gain, like I said, the auto industry generally, the gross margin and the operating margin in that business is very difficult. It's not an Amazon. You're not getting a high price. So I think that's something to contend with.
Oh, fair enough. So Musk wants to save this planet with his electric cars. He also wants to colonize another planet, Mars, as a sort of plan B if and when the Earth is destroyed. Well, with that in mind, he founded SpaceX. In fact, he started that company in 2002, 2 years before joining the board of Tesla. It's a private company based in California, valued at around $27.5 billion. It employs around 6,000 people, and its ultimate goal, well, to enable people like you and me to live on other planets.
It's about believing in the future and thinking that the future will be better than the past. And I can't think of anything more exciting than going out there and being among the stars.
Let's go to Alex now. Alex, how does SpaceX make money? It's working very slowly towards its mission of putting us on Mars, but until then, it has to make money.
Well, it is selling trips to the International Space Station to NASA, for instance, and it's therefore ships, a lot of the goods that are required to maintain the space station on their behalf. That is a very, very lucrative business. And the fact that it is able to reuse its rockets is something that reduces a lot of the cost on their part. That means they pass along some of those reductions to their customer, NASA in this instance, but also are able to squeeze out a little more profit margin.
And they've got space tourism coming up?
Well, I mean, that is the plan. They're not the only company looking at that. We've got Virgin Galactic and others as well.
Yeah.
That's also a question of trust. We're talking about trust with range anxiety. The extent to which there's appetite for that, I think, remains to be seen.
You're adding to my list of anxieties. Now I've got range anxiety. You mentioned Virgin Galactic. Let's bring up this little graphic of the three big entrepreneurs who are in the space race. So we've got Elon Musk there, Jeff Bezos from Amazon, and finally Richard Branson. Just quickly, which of these three is winning the space race right now?
Look, so far it's clear SpaceX, they've got rockets that are in operation. But I really think that the kind of dark horse, not even that dark because we know he's out there, is Jeff Bezos. He's the richest man in the world. He says he sells $1 billion worth of Amazon stock every year purely to fund Blue Origin, his space venture. In an interview, he said, someone asked, what's the most important thing that you're working on, thinking that he might say something at Amazon, and he said, no, it's Blue Origin, it is space exploration.
Stephanie, we know that SpaceX is private, but that doesn't mean that there aren't investors, of course. What attracts them to the company?
That's a good question. I mean, again, I think when you look at Tesla, it's a similar story where you're really looking at Elon Musk as the person. I think a lot of investment is attracted to the company primarily because of him. So I think, I would say primarily because of Elon Musk.
Although, can I chip in? I would say that there's one distinct difference between SpaceX and Tesla, namely that Elon has been very good at delegating at SpaceX. Lynn Shotwell, who's the chief operating officer there, she runs the ship. And there's a great Business Week story on this from a few weeks ago, worth checking out if you've got the time. That's one difference to the way things have been running better at SpaceX.
We're going to round this section up now. Quick question, last question to both of you. Where do you see Musk, Stephanie, in 5, say 10 years' time? Will he still be the boss, or will he be booted out?
I'm bullish on Elon Musk. I think he was in this position in 2008 where everyone said he wasn't going to pull through. He had issues both at Tesla and SpaceX, and he did. So in 5 years' time, I'm bullish he'll still be in the CEO position.
I personally don't think he'll be at Tesla anymore. I think he'll have got bored by then and will have moved on to the next thing. But I do tend to think it'll probably be of his own accord rather than any regulator investor having pushed him out.
Okay, thank you very much to Alex and to Stephanie. That is the hard business bit out of the way. Now let's move on to Musk, the man and the boy. Here's Musk and his mum talking about the good old days.
He was the youngest, he made about 2 days, and the shortest, and then he was this brilliant boy, and so people didn't really like him.
So I was this little bookwormy kid and probably a bit of a smart aleck, so this is a recipe for disaster.
Not that he told me much about it, but he was picked on quite a bit.
So I just read a lot of books and tried to stay out of people's way during school.
And so his social life was much less than my other two kids, and that's a typical nerd.
Only your mother can call you that and it's still okay. Well, let's get into Musk the man now with our new guests. Carol Wilson, a performance coach who works closely with Richard Branson for years, and Ian Robertson, who is a professor of psychology at Trinity College Dublin. Professor Robertson, if I could start with you, what does Elon Musk's childhood tell you, and how important is it to his current success?
Well, it strikes me that his mother was probably underplaying the amount of misery he went through. I mean, he was really badly bullied in school by his own account, and even to be hospitalized. And also, I mean, his home life wasn't sweetness in life as well. I mean, his parents divorced when he was 8. So there's a deep sense of humiliation. He was small, he was bullied, he was a nerd. And I think that can, in some people, that can light a fire. And that fire can motivate you throughout life.
Really? So, I mean, you say he became a nerd, but that was as a result of being a little bit smaller, a little bit picked on. And, of course, that reading then led into this voracious ambition.
Yes. So he went inside his head, and he was a very smart guy as well. And so that combination of a kind of a deep sense of humiliation and inadequacy, perhaps, when he was young, resulted in this motivation.
Carol Wilson, you used to work with Richard Branson for years at the highest levels. When you look at young Elon Musk, do you see any resemblance to Richard Branson?
I think they're probably quite different, but there are some strong resemblances which I see in all great entrepreneurs and indeed in all great geniuses who achieve things. And that's the sheer determination and the ability to get up as soon as they've fallen down. They just get up and keep going. And they believe in their own ideas and love what they do. And they love what they do. They usually love something that they do more than money. It's not about making money, although they quite often do that.
So we know, we've heard from Elon Musk what his mission was to make the planet, it will make human beings a sort of multi-planet species. I can't think of a bigger ambition. What was Richard Branson's ambition?
I think Richard Branson, there was one great similarity, that Richard Branson suffered severely from dyslexia in school. And he was really motivated to achieve things, I think, because he couldn't do well at school. And it also he learnt very well how to get other people to achieve things for him. I think his ambition has always been world domination.
Is that all?
If he had a bit of success with one company, he'd start 5. You know.
Yeah. And of course, they all have to share the common desire to work incredibly hard. In a recent interview with the New York Times, Musk revealed some of the extreme stress he'd been under. Well, he admitted that he'd regularly worked up to 120 hours per week and that he takes the sedative Ambien to get to sleep. He almost missed his brother's wedding, where he was the best man. And he also said that he worked 24 hours non-stop through his 47th birthday. Professor Robertson, come back to you. That kind of lifestyle, no matter how driven you are, just not sustainable.
No, it isn't sustainable, and we saw the cracks in that New York Times interview. Elon Musk seems to react to setbacks, to grief, to pain by going forward, by these plans for world domination, as Carol said. But I mean, even after his first child died at 10 weeks of sudden infant death syndrome, and his wife reported that he really just, reacted to that by just going forward, but keeping going. And that kind of cycle is, if you don't have a way of coming down from that, it can have an accumulated toll and can really take a toll on your judgment, as we saw in the tweet, for instance, and in the response to the Thai cave rescue.
Carol, you're nodding in agreement there.
Yes, I think that one thing that all the entrepreneurs and great artists and musicians and so on have in common is that they love what they do. So they will do things for 24-hour cycles. Musicians will do it, and quite often they'll take drugs to sustain them while they do it. So if they don't learn to actually take time out and repair their physical health, it will lead to very serious consequences. Branson's always been quite good at the work-life balance thing, so he's very sporty and lives on an island, spends half his life on the beach, so he's quite good at that.
Okay, well, maybe they should get in touch a bit more often and they could advise him. Well, as we heard in our first report, Musk's Twitter outburst isn't the first time he's alarmed investors. Tesla's shares dropped 10% after he took just one puff of weed, marijuana for you old school, on a famous online chat show last month. And he's currently being sued by a British cave rescuer who's rather angry at Musk for calling him a paedophile. You may remember Mr. Vernon Unsworth helped rescue 12 boys in Thailand who were stuck in a cave. And it was Mr. Unsworth who said Musk's offer of help, a submarine, was merely a PR stunt. Incredible accusation by Musk to an otherwise unknown individual. Professor Robertson, you say that that's a sign of his thin skin.
Yes, his thin skin, and it was an uncharitable response by Unsworth to an offer, even though the offer wasn't practical, and there may have been some high-handedness in the way it was offered, I don't know. But the reaction was so enraged that wasn't just a rational reaction, that there was a deep sense of hurt that was being channeled in that reaction, probably from his early experiences.
I just want to go back to you, Carol, and talk about success. There'll be a lot of mums and dads out there watching who will say, I wonder if my child, who perhaps isn't the best on the sports field, could be the next Elon Musk. What's important when fostering that kind of taste for success?
Well, it's interesting that I think one of the reasons that Richard Branson was so successful was because of his mother. She flew gliders in the war and delivered planes. which was very unusual for a woman in the early days. And she always brought him up to be very positive, very independent. There's the apocryphal story of him being put out of the car when he was 4 and told to find his own way home.
Okay.
And
I'll remember that one. I'm sure I'll end up in the police station, but thank you for that.
Yes. And so I think encouragement is a thing from parents. She was always very full of not just praise but encouragement, but also encouraging him to challenge himself. She didn't give him an easy ride.
Well, there we go. Carol Wilson, you'll have the last word there, and Ian Robertson, thank you also for your contribution to the Nexus today. Well, that is all we have time for. We're going to leave you with some beautiful pictures now of Elon Musk's personal car, Tesla Roadster, which he blasted into space early this year, obviously. See you next week.